Howdy y'all, welcome back, thank you for being here. To conquer the Golden Circle was the objective of a secret society formed in America in roughly 1854. The Knights of the Golden Circle formed under the supervision of the richest men in America and Europe to create a new country known as the Golden Circle, Spanish Círculo Dorado, where slavery would have been legal. The country would have been centered in Havana, Cuba as the capital, and it would have consisted of the entire southern United States as well as the Golden Circle of territories, which included all of Mexico that was to be divided into 25 new slave states, as well as all of Central America, northern South America, as well as all of Cuba, all of Haiti, and all of the Dominican Republic, as well as every island of the Caribbean, for a total Golden Circle of over 2,400 miles in diameter. Today, this Golden Circle secret organization is described in the current narrative as lacking significant funding in the 19th century, and their history is said to be obscure at best. Yet, as we peel back this narrative, we see the Knights of the Golden Circle could have easily been part of the secret societies, the very Masons we see in the early photographs, who appeared to be inheriting much of the country. But let's look at the beginning. The Knights of the Golden Circle, according to the narrative, have their origins in three main events or ideas, with the secret society being founded on July 4th, 1854. Remarkably, from the three things said to have led to the creation of the Knights of the Golden Circle, two of the three events occurred well after the founding of the Knights, and the third was a major ongoing conflict. Furthermore, alleged claims that the Knights of the Golden Circle were founded the whole way back in 1834 were made in published exposés in 1863. Initially, the Knights of the Golden Circle formed from a failed attempt to annex Cuba, which became known as the Ostend Manifesto. However, this manifesto, sent to Congress in October of 1854, was drafted months after the alleged founding of the Knights of the Golden Circle, and seemingly couldn't be a cause for the founding of this society. But I digress. The Ostend Circular or Ostend Manifesto declared that the U.S. should purchase Cuba from Spain, and if they refused, the U.S. should declare war. Cuba was seen as key to expanding slaveholder control at this time, and the Ostend Manifesto was then drafted up by American ministers who were sent to Europe, including Pierre Solé, the minister to Spain, James Buchanan, the future president and then minister to Britain, and John Young Mason, the minister to France. They met at the behest of Secretary of State William Marcy, who sought to annex Cuba for the pro-democratic, pro-slavery presidency of Franklin Pierce. The ministers first met secretly in Ostend, Belgium in early 1854 before finalizing their draft in Aachen, Prussia in October of that same year. We're told interest in Cuba had begun with John Quincy Adams and Thomas Jefferson, but eventually, during the presidency of Jefferson, he enacted a no-transfer policy with the Spanish Empire. We're told the U.S. then sought to keep Cuba out of the control of other world powers, but did not immediately seek to annex it. However, Cuba was of special interest to the Southern Democrats, who after seeing an onslaught of immigrants arrive to the northern states, had lost their balance of power in the House of Representatives. Not only would annexing Cuba expand their slaveholding domain, but it would retroactively add more representatives in Congress and the House of a pro-Southern rationale. Under President James K. Polk, Congress, using an offer that was drafted up by then Secretary of State and later President James Buchanan, the United States offered $100 million to purchase Cuba, but was quickly denied, and Buchanan is quoted as saying Spain would rather see Cuba at the bottom of the ocean than to see it transferred to another world power. The Whig administration that followed Polk's did not pursue Cuba. However, when Franklin Pierce took office in 1853, he made it one of his goals to annex the country. Quote, Cuba is as necessary to the North American Republic as any of its present members, and that it belongs naturally to that great family of states of which the Union is the providential nursery, end quote. News of the Ostend Manifesto ostensibly fractured the Democratic Party, leading to the founding of many obscure and short-lived political parties in America, like the Know Nothing Party. Another theorized cause for the Knights of the Golden Circle, who were founded in 1854, is the Filibuster War, also known as the National Campaign of 1856 and 1857. Again, you can see how this timeline doesn't exactly add up. In this incredible narrative, we're told one person, William Walker, brought a small private army to Nicaragua in 1855, seizing control of the country 1 year later and installing himself as the president. Again, take all of this history with a grain of salt, but we're told Nicaragua had gained independence from the United Provinces of Central America in roughly 1838. However, this did not free the region from conflict. With the beginning of the 1850s and the California Gold Rush, thousands sought to head west, and they sought alternate routes, which we're told brought these settlers to Nicaragua. However, as Great Britain heavily patrolled this area, and since the Clayton-Bulwer Treaty, we're told neither the United States nor Britain would claim definitive control of Nicaragua in hopes of building a mutually beneficial canal. However, a divide arose between the independent liberal and independent conservative parties of Nicaragua, which culminated in an all-out civil war by 1854. Here is where it gets really strange. We're told the Democratic or Liberal Party of Nicaragua was losing traction, and they employed the services of William Walker, a well-known soldier of fortune, to organize a militia group. Diving into this William Walker character further, he is very interesting. Does this look like a military fighting man to you? How is this one of the most savage privateers of the 1850s? We're told William Walker was born in 1824 in Nashville, Tennessee, and was the grandson of Lipscomb Norvell, a famous American Revolutionary War officer. And Walker's uncle was John Norvell, founder of the Philadelphia Inquirer. We're also told that William Walker was engaged to a woman once, but she passed away young and he died childless. Walker was said to have graduated in the top 1% of his class from the University of Nashville at the age of 14. By age 19, he had graduated from the prestigious University of Pennsylvania with his medical degree. He then continued his studies in Scotland and then Germany before moving to New Orleans, Louisiana. From here, he traveled to San Francisco in 1849, and this is where it gets really interesting. At the age of 25, he worked as the editor of the San Francisco Herald. He was also said to have dueled at least 3 people at this time and won. Walker then formed a small militia in San Francisco and attempted to invade Sonora for the state of Arizona. In 1853, Walker then traveled to Mexico to seek approval for establishing his own colony, which was quickly denied. We're then told William Walker spent the next few months gathering men before traveling to Baja California with a militia of roughly only 45 men. Somehow, William Walker then captured the capital of Baja California at that time, La Paz, declaring himself the president of the newly founded Republic of Lower California, and his lawyer and law partner, Henry Watkins, was declared vice president. Walker then relocated the capital to Cabo San Lucas and declared his kingdom part of the larger Republic of Sonora. When the Mexican government sent numerous troops, Walker quickly retreated back to California and was indicted for violating the Neutrality Act of 1794. All charges were dismissed, and we're told since no interoceanic route existed from the Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean at this time, and the Transcontinental Railroad also did not exist, we're told for numerous decades the largest trade route from New York to San Francisco ran through Nicaragua. Essentially, boats sailed the Atlantic to the San Juan River and then across Lake Nicaragua before entering stagecoaches that would take them to the Pacific coast where they would enter ships that would then head to San Francisco. This entire means of transportation from Atlantic to Pacific in Nicaragua was controlled and exploited by the Accessory Transit Company, owned by Cornelius Vanderbilt. When civil war was declared in Nicaragua in 1854, the Democratic Party, as I mentioned, hired Walker to help retake the country. Interestingly, Walker employed Charles Frederick Henningsen, who was a veteran of the Hungarian Revolution and the Circassian War in Tartaria. By October 13th, Walker was said to have taken control of the government of Nicaragua, declaring himself president, which was later legitimized by U.S. President Franklin Pierce. As Walker attempted to seize control of the functions of Nicaragua, Walker had two people, C.K.G.C. and Charles Morgan, who worked for Vanderbilt. They came to him looking to double-cross Vanderbilt if Walker would seize control of the Accessory Transit Company and install them as president and vice president. When Walker did this, we're told that Cornelius Vanderbilt hired a secret private militia to retake Nicaragua, backed by the Costa Rican government and hundreds of thousands of dollars of his own private funds. A key role was then said to have been played by the Costa Rican army in unifying the other Central American armies to fight against Walker and the filibusters. The filibusters were said to be rich Americans who sought to illegally establish new colonies in Central and South America on behalf of the United States in an act of manifest destiny that was not approved by Congress. Walker surrendered by May of 1857. When Walker returned home, he was considered to be a hero by most, and he was repatriated. However, when Walker publicly blamed his defeat and his loss of Nicaragua on the U.S. Navy, it divided public opinion. When Walker attempted to set off for Nicaragua again in late 1857, he was arrested by the U.S. Home Squadron of the Navy and returned to the United States. However, the Navy's actions of detaining a private citizen caused much controversy, and many saw it as an abuse of William Walker's rights. Walker then wrote a detailed account of his time in Nicaragua, which he published in 1860. That same year, he gathered yet another militia and made yet another journey to the region, landing in Honduras. Here, Walker was met by wealthy British clients who hoped to back him in forming an exclusively English-speaking but not British government. We're told that Walker agreed, and just days later, he was arrested by Noel Salmon of the British Royal Navy. Instead of returning William Walker home to the United States as ordered under law, we're told Salmon handed Walker over to the Honduran government, who charged him with piracy and filibustering before sentencing him to death. Walker's passing in 1860 was said to be a massive contributing factor in convincing many Southerners of the desirability of creating an independent slaveholding empire, leading to the outbreak of the Civil War. But these aspirations were also said to have envisioned this slave-holding capital being in the tropical Latin America, which leads us nicely into the Knights of the Golden Circle. However, before getting into that, there's also the third event that was said to have led to the founding of these knights. And this was something that occurred essentially continuing through the outbreak of the Civil War. And that was the call for the full annexation of Mexico, also known as the All of Mexico movement. Origins and exact founders of this movement are unclear, as it has never been properly defined, but beginning with the founding fathers in 1776, there have been calls for the annexation of the South, including Mexico. Annexation of Mexico was considered one of the most important and the most controversial aspects of manifest destiny, and until the 1850s, we're told in the current narrative, these movements to annex Mexico simply did not gain enough traction in the public or in Congress. Yet, when the American troops conquered Mexico City during the Mexican-American War, there was a renewed hope that came to the South where their dreams of annexing Mexico and forming a massive slaveholding kingdom might come to fruition. Before Polk took presidency in 1845, the U.S. had also just annexed Texas. Looking to legitimize these new borders, Polk was said to have sent troops to the Rio Grande River, the disputed new border for Texas. From 1845 onward, almost universally, the Democrats agreed that annexing Mexico was the only possible option to find peace. But secretly, many of these Democrats may have looked to create a slaveholding kingdom that would have eventually superseded the United States. In the end, according to the mainstream narrative, the American public refused the ideas of accepting, quote, non-whites into their union, and this was detailed in a rather immature speech by John C. Calhoun to Congress in 1848. Now let's bring this full circle, excuse my pun, into the Knights of the Golden Circle. The Knights of the Golden Circle were founded on July 4th, 1854 by George Washington Lafayette Bickley. However, the history here, as I mentioned earlier, is said to be obscure, but let's dissect it. Some sources say the Knights of the Golden Circle were founded in Cincinnati, Ohio, while others claim Lexington, Kentucky. What we do know is that the lodges or meeting places for this secret society were known as the castles. Now, the current narrative basically claims this group never held significant power and only had scattered membership throughout the United States, claiming Bickley himself fled the North around the end of the 1850s in severe debt, looking to consolidate his debt by gaining financing and support for an expedition he claimed would capture and conquer Mexico. The current narrative claims that the Knights of the Golden Circle was a rather small group with relatively little power, and they make the founder Bickley himself in the narrative out to be a man on the run. Yet we have memoirs that were published in 1863 about the Knights of the Golden Circle, which postulate that they are one of the most important and powerful secret organizations who control much of the American South. Indeed, in 1861, we have front page articles about the Knights of the Golden Circle being published in the New York Times, describing the powerful secret organization as a successor to the Order of the Lone Star, which itself had been organized to conquer Nicaragua, which it did under the command of one of its founding members, none other than William Walker. Essentially, the Order of the Golden Circle was secretive for much longer than the current narrative gives it credit for, and the reported history that we have today appears to only have occurred after incidents happened that brought the organization to national limelight. We're told the Knights of the Golden Circle implemented a policy of promoting Knights of the Columbian Star, their highest rank, to the highest levels of public office, including president. And this nearly occurred in the year 1860. We're told several members of the outgoing James Buchanan staff were the highest ranking members of the Knights of the Golden Circle, including the Secretary of War, John Floyd, and the Secretary of Treasury, Howell Cobb, as well as the Vice President himself, John Breckinridge. In 1860, the Knights of the Golden Circle orchestrated a plan where they secretly captured as many navy yards, forts, railroads, etc. as possible, using their substantial means. The plan was to stop Abraham Lincoln, who had won the presidency, from being able to reach Washington, D.C. And we're told hundreds of knights were stationed in Baltimore, Maryland, with a plan of intercepting Lincoln on his way to his inauguration. The knights would then reveal themselves to have already captured the forts of Washington, D.C., before then installing John Breckinridge, Buchanan's vice president, and the Knights of the Golden Circle leader as the new president of the United States. As the Knights seized control of Baltimore and began seizing forts in the South, this plot was ousted by the federal government. It became front page news, leading to a massive distrust of the Democratic Party, who became known as the Copperheads, those who publicly sought peace, but behind closed doors sought to illegally manipulate the system. By 1859, these Knights of the Golden Circle had castles in every state. Although considered a Unionist, Sam Houston also was a member of the Knights of the Golden Circle, and he was most likely a very high-ranking member. He went before the U.S. Congress in 1858 and claimed, and I quote, "The United States needs to declare and maintain an efficient and effective protectorate over the states of Mexico, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Guatemala, Honduras, and San Salvador," end quote. By 1860, the Texas division of the Knights of the Golden Circle had 21 castles alone, with over 4,000 military knights in its service. President Buchanan was strongly supported by the Knights as well, and may have also been a secret member. Originally, through the year 1861, the Knights of the Golden Circle initially only organized to extend America's territory in hopes of creating a grand slaveholding union that would control the entire New World. However, with the election of Abraham Lincoln, the Knights of the Golden Circle were said to have changed their position and drafted an order for secession from the northern United States. We're told by February 1861, former leader of the Texas Rangers and Knight of the Golden Circle commander, Bren McCullough, marched on San Antonio with a cavalry of 550 men from 6 Texas castles. These troops successfully captured the arsenals in San Antonio. The Knights of the Golden Circle were also responsible for the successful temporary takeover of the New Mexico territory in 1861, which was followed by the New Mexico Campaign, also led by the Knights of the Golden Circle, where the Knights attempted to conquer most of the south and west of the United States, including the gold fields in Colorado and then the major ports of California. By 1862, it was reported to Congress that former President Franklin Pierce was in fact a member of the Knights of the Golden Circle, but this was never confirmed. However, the history gets even stranger. This order, the Knights of the Golden Circle, again, described in the current narrative as small and without any major gains, was by 1863 in direct opposition of Congress, who had enacted a military draft for the Civil War. Many, even those in the Republican Party, were said to have denounced the draft, and further growth of the Knights of the Golden Circle is recorded at this time, having established hundreds of their castles throughout the United States. We're told by the Gettysburg Campaign in 1863, the Knights of the Golden Circle had also invaded or infiltrated south central Pennsylvania. Thousands of $1 paper tickets from the Order or the Knights of the Golden Circle were presented to the thousands of Amish farmers in Pennsylvania. We're told the Knights of the Golden Circle then taught the Amish the secret hand signs to give when the Confederates arrived, as well as presenting them with the $1 tickets equivalent to roughly $25 today. These secret hand gestures and the tickets were supposed to have saved the Amish in Pennsylvania from destruction during the Civil War. In California, the Knights of the Golden Circle retrofitted ships and began raiding the Pacific coast for gold, beginning in the 1860s. By 1863, and nearing the height of the Civil War, the Knights of the Golden Circle reorganized first as the Order of American Knights, and then again as the Order of the Sons of Liberty in 1864. By the end of 1864, we're told thousands of members of the Knights of the Golden Circle held office throughout the country, and a plan was also being developed in the Old Northwest, being the region directly around the Great Lakes, to overthrow the North and end the war. However, this plot was also ousted by the federal government, and both the Knights of the Golden Circle and the Order of the Sons of Liberty were prosecuted nationwide, leading to the supposed dissolving of the entire secret society. However, adding further fuel to the secret endless theory regarding this order and the idea that they may have survived. In 2013, in Trinity County, California, there was discovered the Saddle Ridge Hoard, a well-organized collection of over 1,420 gold coins with a face value of over $27,000, but an assessed current value of well over $10 million. These coins, which are still being examined by scientists and historians today, are said to date back from as early as 1847, with a majority of the coins coming from before or during the Civil War. This is the largest collection of buried gold coins ever found in the United States. The Order of the Sons of Liberty makes a reference to the Knights of the Golden Circle as peaceful Democrats, as mentioned earlier, who were known as Copperheads, who opposed the Civil War publicly, yet at the same time, we're also told the Knights of the Golden Circle helped draft and conduct the Order of Secession for the South, which spearheaded the war itself. According to modern historians, the owners of the land where these coins were found in 2013, who still remain anonymous, stated that there were ancient trees on their land that were in alignment with the North Star. When they examined these trees, they found the trees were so old, in fact, they contained tin cans that were hung from the trees at least a century ago, and the tree had grown up around the cans. So the cans were actually embedded inside the tree. It was between these trees that the golden hoard of coins was found. Now, the origin of these coins is still up for debate, but initially it was believed they were part of the Great Robbery of the San Francisco Mint that occurred in 1901. However, the U.S. Mint has ruled out this theory, claiming, amongst other evidence, that many of these coins were too old. The U.S. Mint also came forward in 2014, claiming that they do not believe that any of these coins were from any thefts or other missing coins that were stolen over the last 200 years, meaning this massive collection of Civil War era gold coins was most likely acquired through relatively honest means. But again, that's still open for debate. However, one of the theories which has generated the most traction with historians and even in scientific circles is that this gold coin stash is from the Knights of the Golden Circle, as their collection of funds that they accumulated during the end of the Civil War. These funds would have been hidden from the federal government to be stashed away for the financing of a future second Civil War, which is written and foretold in the Knights of the Golden Circle literature. According to the deciphering of the narrative, we have a known list of confirmed members of the Knights of the Golden Circle, which include Bickley, the founder, John Wilkes Booth, the assassin of Abraham Lincoln, Albert Pike of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, the Grand Wizard, Nathan Bedford Forrest, the outlaw Jesse James, as mentioned earlier, Sam Houston, as well as the Confederate spies, Cynthia Charlotte Moon and Virginia Moon, and the Vice President of the United States, John Breckinridge. We also have a multitude of prominent representatives and congressmen of the mid-19th century, and we also have an elaborate theory that claims that the Paysor family may have been leaders or founders of the Golden Circle as well. For an organization that we're told never had a lot of power, at least in the current narrative, and we're told they were fueled more by ambition, it certainly seems the Knights of the Golden Circle were in fact the true heart of the South, and backed by the leading financiers and Freemasons of this time period. The plot of the Knights of the Golden Circle appears to be one of the single most underreported events of the Civil War era, which is fascinating given it goes hand in hand with the war itself.